Hey, my name's Josh Miller. I'm 25 years old and one overdue bill away from losing pretty much everything. I live in a tired 3-story walk up on the east side of Los Angeles, the kind of building with peeling paint, flickering hallway lights, and a constant smell of someone else's dinner seeping under your door. My apartment is on the third floor, Unit 3B. One bedroom if you're being generous, more like a glorified shoebox with a view of the alley and the dumpsters. The rent isn't cheap, not for what it is, but it's the cheapest thing I could find that wasn't actively collapsing. Until 3 months ago, I was managing to scrape by on my entry level salary as a junior web developer for a small agency downtown. Then the car accident happened. It was a rainy Tuesday night, and a guy in a lifted truck decided a red light didn't apply to him. My 2008 Corolla never stood a chance. I walked away with a sprained wrist and some bruises, but the car was totaled. Insurance covered part of it, but not the rental, not the Ubers I needed to get to work, and definitely not the missed days when the agency regretfully had to let me go because they were restructuring. That was 3 months ago. Since then, I've been delivering groceries for gig apps, fixing WordPress sites for random clients on freelance platforms, and watching my savings evaporate like water on hot pavement. I'm 2 months behind on rent. My credit cards are maxed. My fridge hums louder than my laptop. And my biggest meal most days is whatever's on sale in the frozen section. My landlord's name is Elena Rossi. First thing you need to know, she is not what you picture when you hear landlord. When I moved in a year ago, I expected some gruff old guy who'd grunt once a month while shoving a notice under my door. Instead, a woman in her late 30s, early 40s maybe, opened the office door and introduced herself in a low, calm voice. "I'm Elena. I own the building. Application?" She had dark hair pulled back into a low bun, sharp cheekbones, and brown eyes that looked like they saw right through excuses. Tailored black trousers, white blouse, no nonsense. She wasn't rude, just efficient. She read my application, asked a few pointed questions about my job, my income, my references, and then handed me the keys. "Rent is due on the 1st. If you need something fixed, email the address on the card. Don't make noise after 11. No smoking, no subletting, no drama." She tilted her head slightly. "You look like the no drama type, Josh." I laughed weakly. "I'll do my best." Over the next year, I didn't see much of her. Once in a while, I'd catch her in the hallway, clipboard in hand, inspecting something. She'd nod, maybe ask if my heater was working, then move on. The other tenants called her the Ice Queen when they thought she wasn't around. Never smiles, always watching, only cares about rent. That version of Elena is what I had in my head when the red eviction notice showed up on my door. It was a Friday morning in late October. The air had that faint chill that passes for fall in LA. I opened my door, and there it was, taped at eye level in bright, screaming red: "Notice to pay, rent or quit." I skimmed it, my stomach dropping. 3 days to pay the full amount, plus late fees for the last 2 months, or pack up and leave. My hands went cold. I had maybe $87 in my checking account. My freelance gig had just ghosted me after demanding 3 revisions for exposure. There was no miracle paycheck coming. I spent that day in a fog, scrolling through job boards, doing the math I already knew. There was no way I could box up my life and sleep on a friend's couch if any of them had space, or drive back to my hometown in Arizona, tail between my legs, and move into my mom's spare room. She'd take me, no questions asked, but the thought of admitting I'd failed here, that I couldn't hold it together in the one city I'd dreamed of living in, tasted like ash. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with an email from the building office. Subject: Meeting request. Unit 3B. Josh, please come to the office tomorrow, Saturday, at 10 a.m. to discuss your tenancy. A. Rossi. No dear, no sincerely. Just that. My nerves spiked. This was it. She was going to tell me, face to face, to get out. I barely slept that night. Every creak in the building sounded like the future slamming shut. At 9:58 a.m., I stood outside the small office off the lobby, wiped my sweaty hands on my jeans, and knocked. Come in, that same low voice called. The office was small but neat. Filing cabinets, a metal desk, a window overlooking the street, a plant in the corner that somehow looked more alive than most of my coworkers had. Elena sat behind the desk, glasses on, reading something on a tablet. She looked up as I entered, removed the glasses, and motioned to the chair opposite. Sit. I did, heart pounding. She studied me for a few seconds, those dark eyes assessing. Then she tapped the eviction notice lying on the desk. You know why you're here, yes? Yes, ma'am, I swallowed. I know I'm behind. I'm trying to catch up, but work's been. She held up a hand. I've read your file. You were on time every month until 3 months ago, then partial payment, then nothing. She tilted her head slightly. What happened? I blinked. You want the real answer? That's generally why people ask questions. Something about her dry tone disarmed me. I took a breath. I got laid off, I said. Car accident, missed a few days, they restructured. I've been freelancing, delivering groceries, anything I can, but I'm barely covering food and bills. I'm interviewing, but I laughed weakly. Everybody wants 3 years' experience for an entry-level job. She listened without interrupting, fingers steepled. When I trailed off, she nodded once. Do you have anyone who can help you? Family? Friends? I shook my head. My mom's not in a position to spot me a couple grand. Friends? We're all broke. She leaned back. So if I proceed with the eviction, what's your plan? The question hit me harder than I expected. I stared at my hands. I don't know. Go back to Arizona, I guess. Start over? Again? Silence stretched. I risked a glance up. Elena was watching me, something unreadable in her expression. Stand up, she said suddenly. What? She gestured. Humor me? Confused, I stood. She came around the desk, walked a slow circle around me like she was inspecting a used car. College? She asked. Yeah, Arizona State. Computer science. Criminal record? No, I mean speeding ticket once. Debt? I almost laughed. Student loans, obviously. Credit cards. Probably more than I want to admit. She nodded thoughtfully. Medical issues? No, I mean, not really. I sprained my wrist in the accident, but it's fine now. She stopped in front of me, arms crossed, studying my face. You're what, 5'10", 11? 5'11". Okay. She went back behind her desk, sat and folded her hands. I have a proposal for you, Josh. My pulse jumped. A payment plan? An extension? I sat down slowly. A proposal? This building, she said, gesturing vaguely upward, and 3 others like it belong to me. My late husband left them to me when he died. Unfortunately, he also left me with a family full of vultures and a very creative attorney. She opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, and slid it across to me. In his infinite wisdom, he wrote a clause into his trust. If I remain unmarried for 5 years after his death, primary control of the properties shifts to his younger brother, Anthony. I retain a stipend, he gets the rest. I frowned, trying to process. So, if you don't remarry, your brother-in-law gets your buildings? Correct. How long has it been? She checked her watch, as if it kept track of more than time. 4 years and 330 days. My eyes widened. You have 5 days? Technically 6, but yes. Her mouth twisted. Anthony assumed I'd either crawl back to him for help or crumble. I did neither. Now he's circling, waiting for the clock to run out. I looked at the folder, then at her. And what does that have to do with me? She watched me for a beat, then said very calmly, I need a husband. On paper. Immediately. The words took a second to land. I'm sorry? Illegal marriage, she said, as if explaining a software bug. No romance required, no physical expectations. We sign the papers, present them to the trust lawyer, and I retain control of the properties. After 12 months, we file for divorce. I pay you for your trouble. You walk away with your credit repaired, and you never have to worry about rent again, at least for a while. My brain short-circuited. You want to marry me? Your tenant who can't even pay rent? Precisely because you can't pay rent, she said. You're desperate enough to consider it. You have no criminal record, you present well enough in a suit, and you clearly aren't associated with my delightful in-laws. Most importantly, you owe me something, which makes you easier to manage. I opened my mouth, closed it, then laughed in disbelief. This is insane. Probably, she said, but it's also efficient. I stared at her. You can't just... This has to be illegal, she shrugged. Marriage for convenience isn't illegal. People do it for immigration, health insurance, social standing, morally dubious perhaps. Legally? Gray, but manageable. My attorney will draft a contract. The trust lawyer will scrutinize us, yes, but if we look convincing, there's nothing they can do. You want me to pretend to be your husband for a year? Yes. And in exchange, what? Your back rent is cleared, she said. I'll pay off your credit card balances. Within reason, I'm not funding a Tesla. I'll cover your student loan payments for the duration of the marriage. You'll have free rent in 3B for the year. At the end, assuming you've upheld your side, I'll pay you $100,000 lump sum. The number slammed into me like a physical force. 100,000. Correct. I tried to breathe. That kind of money would erase years of anxiety. No more choosing between groceries and minimum payments. No more lying to my mom about how great LA is. I could actually reboot my career, maybe start that app idea instead of just daydreaming about it between orders, but also marrying my landlord for money. That's the kind of story you read in shady tabloids or Reddit threads, not live. Why me? I asked quietly. You could find someone with better everything: status, income, looks. Her lips twitched, almost a smile. Better looks is debatable, she said dryly. But status is exactly why it's you and not a lawyer friend. Anthony will assume any wealthy man in my orbit has ulterior motives. With you, the imbalance is obvious. A broke 20-something tenant marrying a widowed building owner? Everyone will think I'm the one taking advantage, which frankly, I am. She leaned forward. I'm not offering you romance, Josh. I'm offering a transaction. You give me what I need, a husband on paper who won't challenge me for control. I give you what you need: breathing room, freedom from the trap you're in. The room was too small, the air too thick. I rubbed my temples. This is a lot. I'm aware. You don't have to answer now. She slid a card toward me. Talk to a friend, a lawyer if you know one, but I need your decision by Monday morning. After that, I'll pursue other options, and your eviction proceeds as scheduled. I looked at the eviction notice, then at the card. Her name, number, email in crisp black print. If I say no, I said slowly, this conversation never happened, right? That would be wise for both of us. I stood on shaky legs. Okay, I'll think about it. She nodded once, already putting her glasses back on. Do. Sisters, I spent the weekend arguing with myself. The moral part of my brain screamed that this was wrong. Marriage was supposed to mean something. Love, commitment, all that stuff I'd grown up seeing in my grandparents' house. They'd been married 50 years. This was a business deal wrapped in vows. The survival part of my brain had no such qualms. You're already drowning, it said. This is a lifeline. So what if it's weird? You fake it for a year, help a woman outsmart her greedy in-laws, and you both walk away. You could pay off everything, move to a better place, actually breathe. I called my mom Saturday night. I didn't tell her the whole story, just that I'd been offered an unconventional way out of my debt. Honey, she said, her voice crackling through the cheap speaker, I can't tell you what to do, but I've watched this world chew you up since you left home. If you see a chance to stand on your own 2 feet without hurting anyone, maybe it's worth grabbing. Just don't lose yourself in the process, okay? Lose myself. The phrase echoed. Sunday. I walked the neighborhood for hours, past taco trucks and laundromats and families in little front yards. I thought about going back to Arizona, about sleeping in my childhood bed while my old classmates posted engagement photos and job promotions. I thought about Elena in that office, so controlled, yet clearly fighting a private battle. Monday at 8:55 a.m., I knocked on her door again. She looked up, surprised for half a second, then her face smoothed into that calm mask. Mr. Miller. Josh, I said. My throat was dry. I'll do it. She studied me. You're certain? No, I admitted, but I'm saying yes anyway. For the first time since I'd met her, Elena smiled. Not a big grin, but a small, relieved curve of her mouth that softened her whole face. That's often how the best deals begin, she said. Come in. We have a lot to cover. By Wednesday, I was married. It happened in a cramped county clerk's office downtown, under fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly sick. We filled out forms, showed IDs, signed where we were told. Elena's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Maria, walked us through the separate contract outlining our terms. No expectation of intimacy, joint public appearances as needed, confidentiality. At the end of 12 months, automatic divorce filing with a clause ensuring I had no claim on her assets beyond the agreed payment. I scanned the document, my head spinning. 1 year, I murmured. 12 months and 1 day, Maria corrected. For appearances. Elena stood beside me, steady as stone. When it was time for the vows, the clerk read the standard script in a bored tone. Do you, Elena Rossi, take Joshua Miller? I do, she said. Her voice didn't waver. When it was my turn, my heart hammered. I do, I echoed. We exchanged simple gold bands that Maria had produced. They felt heavy on my skin. Congratulations, the clerk said, stamping the final paper. You're married, just like that. No family, no flowers, no music, just ink on documents and a weight in my chest. On the drive back, Elena was quiet. We sat in the back of a black sedan Maria had hired, the city blurring past the tinted windows. Are you okay? I asked finally. She turned, one eyebrow raised. I should be asking you that. I laughed weakly. I can't believe I just married your landlord for free rent and debt relief. She supplied dryly. Believe it. It happened. Her bluntness made me snort. Some of the tension eased. So, what now? Do I move into your place or something? She shook her head. No, that would complicate things. You stay in 3B. However, she added, we'll need to stage certain aspects of our life. Stage. Appearances, she said. Photos, social media, a few dinners in public. My in-laws will be watching, as will the trust's lawyer. We have to be convincing enough that they don't contest this. I swallowed. You mean we have to look like a real couple? Yes, like holding hands and all that, if necessary. You'll adjust? My face heated. Right. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick, spiral-bound document, slid it onto my lap. What's this? Our script, she said. You might call it a husband handbook. Maria and I put it together over the weekend. It outlines key dates, how we met, our first date, our favorite restaurants, all the things family and nosy lawyers might ask. Learn it. I flipped through pages of bullet points. Our meet cute was now at a neighborhood cafe instead of her office. Our first date was supposedly at a little Italian place in Silver Lake. There were notes on her allergies, her favorite wine, the story of how I'd proposed on the Santa Monica Pier at sunset. Total fiction. This is thorough, I said. It needs to be. Anthony is meticulous. He'll try to trip you up. If you slip, he'll claim fraud. If a judge agrees, the trust moves to him and you walk away with nothing. Maybe worse. Worse? Conspiracy? Perjury? Who knows? Let's avoid that. I clutched the binder a little tighter. Okay, I said. I'll memorize it. Good. She checked her watch. Tomorrow night you'll come to my house for dinner. Anthony and his wife will be there. Consider it your first test. Elena's house was nothing like my building. It sat in the hills above Echo Park, hidden behind high hedges and a black iron gate. The driveway curved up to a modern, glass and concrete structure that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. The front door opened before I could knock. "Josh," Elena said. She wore a simple black dress that somehow managed to be both severe and elegant. Her hair was down for once, dark waves brushing her shoulders. For a second, I forgot how to speak. "You clean up well," she said, glancing at my hastily borrowed blazer. "Come in." The living room was all clean lines and neutral tones, but there were small, unexpected touches. A stack of well-worn paperbacks on the coffee table, a framed photo of a younger Elena with a man I assumed was her late husband standing on a beach, laughing. "Remember?" she murmured as we walked toward the dining room. "We've been together a year. We met at that cafe on Sunset. You asked for the Wi-Fi password, and I corrected your pronunciation of cappuccino." I smirked. "Hard to forget. You underlined it 3 times, because if you say we met in the laundry room downstairs, my brother-in-law will smell blood." We stepped into the dining room. At the table sat a man in his mid-40s with slicked back hair and a too-white smile, and a woman with expertly highlighted blonde hair and a face that said she'd perfected polite cruelty. "Anthony," Elena said. "Sophia. This is my husband, Josh." The word rang in my ears. Anthony stood, giving me a once-over. "So you're the mystery man," he said, extending a hand. His grip was hard, just shy of painful. "Anthony Rossi. I've heard very little about you." Sophia laughed lightly. "Elena likes her privacy." I forced a smile. "Josh Miller. It's nice to meet you both." We sat. Elena's fingers brushed mine under the table, a warning or reassurance, I couldn't tell. Dinner was some kind of roasted salmon with vegetables that probably had names I couldn't pronounce. The conversation started polite enough. Traffic, the heat wave, a story about Sophia's Pilates instructor. But it didn't take long for Anthony to switch gears. "So, Josh," he said, cutting into his fish with surgical precision, "what is it you do?" "I'm a software developer," I said, keeping my tone even. "Mostly front-end stuff. I work remote for an agency based in New York." We'd crafted that answer together. Unemployed and scrambling didn't look good on paper. "Ah," he said, clearly unimpressed. "And where did you meet my dear sister-in-law again?" "At Cafe Verona," I said, glancing at Elena. "On Sunset. I was hogging a table, pretending to work on my novel. She corrected my terrible Italian when I ordered." Elena smiled faintly. "He still can't roll his R's." Sophia chuckled. "How romantic. And when did you make it official?" I pretended to think. "Our anniversary is June 12th, so a little over a year ago." Anthony's eyes narrowed slightly. "And you proposed where?" "Santa Monica Pier," I said, the lie now smooth on my tongue. I almost dropped the ring in the ocean. Elena squeezed my hand under the table. "He did." There was a warmth in her voice that startled me. For a moment, it almost felt real. Anthony dabbed his mouth with his napkin, studying us. "And tell me, Josh," he said casually, "are you comfortable with this lifestyle? With Elena's assets?" I stiffened. "Her assets?" "The buildings," he said. "The responsibility. It can be a lot for someone who comes from more modest means." There it was, the dig. I won't pretend I grew up with money, I said. I didn't. My mom worked 2 jobs most of my childhood, but I respect what Elena's built. I'm not here for her bank account. Of course not, Sophia purred. Love is blind, isn't it? Elena's jaw tightened. We don't have to justify our marriage to you, Anthony. Relax, he said, smiling. We're just curious. We care about you and about protecting Luca's legacy. Elena's late husband, right. If your concern is that I'm planning to steal your buildings out from under her, I said, surprising myself, you can relax. I signed a prenup that makes sure I walk away with exactly what we agreed on and nothing more. Anthony's smile slipped for a heartbeat. Did you now? Of course, Elena said. We're not idiots. Well, she wasn't. I felt pretty close sometimes. Anthony sat back, eyes flicking between us. Well, he said finally, time will tell. The trust lawyer will, of course, want to meet your husband, Elena, to congratulate you. I'm sure he will, she said coolly. Until then, please stop circling the building like a vulture. You're scaring the tenants. Sophia laughed too loudly. Oh, Elena, always so dramatic. The rest of the meal was a blur of small talk and veiled barbs. When it was finally over and Anthony and Sophia left, their expensive perfume lingering in the air, I sagged in my chair. That was fun, I muttered. Elena poured herself a glass of wine, then one for me. You did well, she said. I hated every second of that. Get used to it. There will be more. I took a sip, the wine unfamiliar but good. Do you ever regret marrying into that family? She stared into her glass. Every day, she said softly. But Luca wasn't them. He was different. It was the first time I'd heard her talk about her husband. There was a shadow in her eyes that made my chest ache. I'm sorry, I said. She shrugged one shoulder. Don't be. He's gone. They're not. I have to live with that. We stood there in her silent kitchen, the city lights twinkling through the windows. Why didn't you just give up the buildings? I asked quietly. Walk away. Start over somewhere they can't touch you. She looked at me like I'd spoken another language. These buildings are my work, she said, my sweat. I brought them back from the brink when Luca's father ran them into the ground. I fixed wiring myself, scrubbed graffiti, fought the city over violations. I gave people homes when banks wouldn't look at them. I will not hand that to Anthony on a silver platter because my husband thought it would be amusing. I'd never thought about her that way, not just as a landlord collecting checks, but someone who'd been there with a paint roller and a wrench. Okay, I said. Then we fight. Her gaze sharpened. We fight, she agreed. The first months of our marriage were a strange blur. Outwardly, nothing changed much. I still lived in 3B. I still ate discount frozen pizza more often than I should. I still hustled for freelance gigs now that I had some breathing room to be pickier. But there were small differences. I started seeing Elena more. She'd knock on my door on a Saturday and ask if I wanted to join her for coffee at a nearby cafe for appearances. We'd sit at a corner table discussing tenant complaints like an old married couple complaining about the kids. My husband, she'd say to the barista, the title rolling off her tongue with practiced ease. The first few times it made me flinch, then less so. We took photos, Date like shots at the farmer's market, me carrying a bag of produce while she pretended to scold me for buying too many strawberries. Selfies at a Dodgers game, her idea, surprisingly, where she'd put her arm around my shoulders and lean in, both of us laughing at something on the field. She posted them sparingly on her private social media, which she'd only recently reactivated for documentation. Our story, carefully curated. He's good for you, one of her friends commented on a photo of us at some rooftop bar. You look lighter. I caught glimpses of a side of her I hadn't expected. Elena in sweatpants and a messy bun, sitting cross legged in her office going through spreadsheets. Elena stopping to talk to Mrs. Diaz from 2A about her grandson's graduation, genuinely smiling at the photos. Elena crouched in the hallway helping Mr. Patel from 1C fix the wheel on his grocery cart instead of calling maintenance. You do a lot more than collect rent, I said once, watching her coax the ancient elevator doors closed with a practiced kick. She snorted. Someone has to. Why not hire more staff? You can afford it. Because people like Anthony see staff as numbers, she said. Expendable. If I know every tenant's name and story, I remember why I fight to keep these buildings decent. I saw her late afternoons, walking the property, checking light bulbs, writing notes, pausing when she thought no one was looking to rub at the scar on her left hand, a jagged line from when a piece of glass fell on her during a renovation years back. The more I saw, the less Ice Queen fit. Of course, there were awkward moments too, like the time my friend Tyler dropped by unannounced and found Elena in my kitchen, barefoot drinking coffee. Oh, he said, eyes going wide. Sorry, man. I didn't know you had company. Elena looked up, utterly unfazed. I'm his wife, she said. Tyler choked. His what? I spent the next hour improvising a heavily edited version of events while Tyler stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Dude, he whispered later when Elena stepped out to take a call. You married your landlord? When were you gonna tell me? It just happened, I said lamely. We wanted to keep it quiet. Is this like real? He asked. Or some kind of arrangement? The word hung heavy. It's complicated, I said. He watched me for a beat, then sighed. As long as she's not hurting you, man, she seems intense, but not evil. Yeah, I said. She's something. That night, I found Elena on the roof, leaning on the railing, staring at the city. Tyler knows, I said. At least part of it. She didn't look surprised. He would have found out eventually. Does it bother you? What bothers me, she said, is the thought of you going through this without any support system. You're allowed to have friends, Josh. I'm not your warden. I stepped up beside her. Sometimes it feels like you're the only person holding this whole building upright, I said. She huffed a quiet laugh. Don't romanticize me. I'm just stubborn. Stubborn can be romantic, I said before I could stop myself. She glanced at me, eyes unreadable in the low light. For a second, the air thickened between us. Then she looked away. Go to bed, Josh, she said lightly. Big boy job interviews tomorrow. So Anthony didn't give up, of course. He started showing up at the building more often, strolling through the halls like he owned the place, talking to tenants, asking pointed questions. Have you seen Elena's husband around? He'd murmur as if casually. He got access to our social media posts, printed them out, and brought them to the trust lawyer, poking holes in timelines. He's a tenant, he argued. Convenient, isn't it? He moves in, can't pay rent, suddenly they're married? It's a sham. The trust lawyer, an older man named Clarkson, with a face like carved stone, requested a meeting. Elena brought me along. We sat in his wood-paneled office while he leafed through his file, glasses resting low on his nose. "Mrs. Rossi," he said, "you must understand why this raises questions. I understand you're easily swayed by Anthony's paranoia," she said. "I married a man I met through my business, not exactly unheard of." Clarkson's gaze slid to me. "Josh," he said, "why don't you tell me about the first time you met Elena? Cafe Verona, Wi-Fi password, cappuccino." I recited the story we'd crafted, adding small human details, how she'd rolled her eyes when I pronounced bruschetta wrong, how I'd spilled coffee on my laptop and she'd handed me napkins without a word. Clarkson watched me, occasionally jotting notes. "And what?" he asked. "Do you love most about your wife?" The question caught me off guard. We hadn't rehearsed that. I hesitated. "She cares." Clarkson raised an eyebrow. "Cares?" "She pretends she doesn't," I said, words tumbling out now, honest, despite myself. "She acts like all this," I gestured vaguely, "is just business, numbers, but she knows every tenant's name. She notices when someone's light has been off too long. She shows up with space heaters when people's furnaces break in the winter instead of sending a guy. She fights, even when it costs her. I love that she never quits." The room was quiet. Elena stared at me, something raw flickering in her eyes. Clarkson cleared his throat. "Very well," he said. "Thank you." Later, in the elevator down, Elena stood very still, hands at her sides. "You didn't have to say all that," she said quietly. "It was true," I said. "So I said it." She inhaled slowly. "Be careful, Josh," she murmured. "This is supposed to be pretend." "Right," I said. "Just pretend." But the line was blurring, and we both knew it. It came to a head 3 months before our 1-year mark. By then, my life had changed in ways I hadn't expected. I'd landed a full-time remote job with a decent-sized company, building interfaces that actually excited me. My debts, for the first time since I'd signed my first loan at 18, weren't strangling me. I could buy groceries without checking my balance every 5 seconds. I found myself lingering in Elena's office after check-ins, talking about everything from city politics to our favorite junk food. She had a weakness for red licorice. I loved terrible diner coffee. We'd argue about movies, about whether Die Hard was a Christmas movie, it is, about whether owning property made you a villain by default. She insisted it didn't, if you did it right. One night, after a long day, we ended up in her living room, a bottle of wine between us, some old jazz record playing softly. We were supposed to be going over a new script for a spontaneous couples getaway post. Instead, we talked about Luca. "He was a charmer," she said, smiling faintly. "Too smooth for his own good. He loved big gestures, flash mobs, surprise trips, grand romantic nonsense." "Sounds exhausting," I said. "It was," she admitted, "but it was also good, until it wasn't." What happened? I asked gently. She stared at the ceiling. He got sick, she said. Cancer, fast, angry. He went from running upstairs two at a time to not being able to get out of bed in 6 months. The last thing he did before he died was sign that trust. He thought he was protecting me, forcing me not to isolate, making sure I'd be taken care of. By handing power to Anthony if you didn't remarry, I said. Elena's mouth twisted. Luca always thought his brother would grow up if he had responsibility. He didn't anticipate that Anthony would see this as a game. I watched her, the way her shoulders had curled inward slightly, as if remembering the weight of that time. I'm sorry, I said again, hating how inadequate the words felt. She shrugged, blinking hard. You can stop apologizing for things you didn't do, she said. Just don't get sick. I laughed, the moment easing, but the image of her sitting beside a hospital bed, alone, lodged in my chest. Somewhere along the way, my internal narrative had shifted. She's my landlord. She's my business partner. She's my wife. The words stopped feeling like a joke. So when Anthony finally made his move, I was more invested than either of us had planned. He filed a petition in court, alleging fraud, claimed our marriage was a sham designed solely to subvert the trust, submitted sworn statements from a few disgruntled former tenants painting Elena as manipulative, from a private investigator who dug up the timeline of my missed rent and our sudden marriage. A hearing was scheduled. If the judge sided with him, the trust would transfer. Elena would lose control. Our contract would be worthless. You can walk away, she said the night we got the notice. We were on the roof again, the city sprawling below. If this goes badly, they'll dig into everything. Your finances, your messages, your life. You didn't sign up for that. Yes, I did, I said. When I said, I do, in that ugly office, she snorted despite herself. You're too earnest, she said. It's going to get you hurt. Maybe, I said. But at least I'll go down swinging with you. She looked at me, really looked, for a long moment. Okay, she said quietly. Then we fight. Sit. The courtroom was colder than any server rooms I'd ever worked in. Elena sat beside me at the respondent's table, crisp in a tailored navy suit. Maria stood in front of us like a shield, briefcase by her side. Across the aisle, Anthony and his slick attorney, Nelson, radiated smug confidence. The judge, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and an air of weary no-nonsense, called the session to order. Nelson went first. He painted a picture of a grieving widow manipulated by a tenant. He pointed to my eviction notice, the sudden marriage days before the trust deadline, the lack of prior social media evidence of our relationship. This is a textbook case of fraud, he declared. A sham marriage designed solely to circumvent the clear intent of the trust. Maria countered with our photos, testimonies from tenants who spoke of Elena's dedication, of seeing us together over months. She emphasized that the trust didn't forbid Elena from remarrying a tenant, only required she be married. The intent, she argued, was to ensure she had companionship, not to place a moral judgment on how she found it. Then it was my turn on the stand. I swore in, hands sweating, heart racing. Mr. Miller, Nelson began, oozing politeness, is it true that prior to your marriage, You were 2 months behind on rent. Yes, I said. And facing eviction? Yes. And shortly before the trust deadline, your landlord, excuse me, Mrs. Rossi, offered you a way out. Marry her, and your debts would be erased. Correct? Yes. And you agreed. Yes. So you married for money, he said, pouncing. I met his gaze. I married for survival, I said. Money was part of that. He smirked. And love? I swallowed. Came later, I said. Unexpectedly, a murmur rippled through the courtroom. Isn't it true, Nelson pushed, that you signed a separate contract outlining $100,000 payment at the end of this marriage? Yes, I said. We were honest about that with each other, if not with you, and you expect this court to believe there is anything real about this union? I expect this court to believe that people don't always fall in love in ways that make sense on paper, I said, surprising even myself. We started as a deal. I won't lie about that. But sharing coffee at 6 in the morning while she checked boiler reports, holding a flashlight while she fixed a busted pipe, seeing her bring space heaters to old ladies when the power went out in the middle of winter. That's not fraud. That's life. Messy. Unexpected. Nelson scoffed. Touching speech, Mr. Miller, but the law cares about facts, not feelings. Feelings tend to make more durable contracts than money, Maria interjected. The judge shot her a warning look, but there was a flicker of amusement. Nelson shifted tactics. Tell me, Mr. Miller, he said, have you and Mrs. Rossi ever shared a bed? Elena stiffened. Maria started to object, but I spoke first. That's none of your business, I said. On the contrary, he said smoothly, it goes to the consummation of the marriage, which in many jurisdictions. The judge held up a hand. Mr. Nelson, she said dryly, we are not in the 19th century. Move on. Laughter rippled in the back row. Nelson's jaw ticked. He tried another angle, probing for inconsistencies in our story, where we'd celebrated certain holidays, what gift I'd given her for her birthday. Thanks to that binder and too many late nights quizzing each other, I had the answers. Finally, it was Elena's turn. She took the stand like she took the hallway on rent day, straight-backed, unflinching. Mrs. Rossi, Nelson said, do you admit that your initial motivation in marrying Mr. Miller was to retain control of your properties? Yes, she said. No hesitation. Whispers hissed through the room. And you see nothing wrong with that? I see something wrong with a trust that presumes a widow can't be trusted with her own property unless she's tethered to a man, she said evenly. I see something wrong with a clause designed to punish me for not grieving on someone else's schedule. My husband made a mistake. I'm correcting it. Nelson pounced. So you admit this was a calculated move? Of course it was, she said. I calculated that Anthony would strip these buildings for parts, raise rents, and throw out half the tenants who can barely afford to live here now. I calculated that I know this work better than anyone, and I calculated that Josh, for all his financial trouble, was decent enough not to try to steal from me once the year was up. And your feelings for him? He asked mockingly. Also calculated? She paused, looked over at me. Something gentler moved in her expression. No, she said quietly. That was unexpected, and frankly, inconvenient. A small, startled laugh escaped me. Even the judge's mouth twitched. Nelson tried a few more jabs, but Elena parried each with cool honesty. Yes, it started as a transaction. Yes, she needed a husband for legal reasons. No, that didn't mean every moment of the past year was fake. In her rebuttal, Maria drove it home. The trust didn't say Mrs. Rossi must marry for pure romantic reasons, she said. It said she must be married. She is. The court is not in the business of policing the private dynamics of adult relationships, only their legality. Unless Mr. Nelson can show that this marriage violates a specific statute, what he's really objecting to is that his client doesn't like how Mrs. Rossi chose to exercise her rights. The judge called a recess. My legs felt like jelly as we sat on a hard bench in the hallway, waiting. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "For what?" Elena asked. "For dragging you into this, for not being someone more respectable to do this with." She looked at me like I was insane. "Josh," she said, "don't you dare apologize for existing. I chose you. I'm not in the habits of making choices I regret." My throat tightened. "You said this was inconvenient," I said. "The feelings—" "It is," she said. "It complicates everything, but that doesn't mean I'd undo it." The courtroom doors opened. The bailiff called us back in. We stood, hearts pounding as the judge read her decision. "I find," she said, "that while the circumstances of this marriage are unconventional, the petitioners have not demonstrated that it violates the terms of the trust or any applicable statute. Contracts made for mixed motives are still contracts. The trust remains under Mrs. Rossi's control." Anthony exploded. "This is absurd," he shouted. "They admitted it was a sham." The judge banged her gavel. "Sit down, Mr. Rossi, or I'll hold you in contempt. Your brother trusted your sister-in-law enough to give her this path. You may not like how she walked it, but that's not grounds to steal it from her." She turned to us. "Mrs. Rossi, Mr. Miller, you may want to have an honest conversation outside any legal counsel about what you both want going forward. Court is adjourned." Her words hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Since outside, under the stark blue sky, we stood on the courthouse steps, blinking in the sudden light. "We won," I said, still half in disbelief. "We did," Elena said. Her shoulders, always so taut, seemed to drop a fraction of an inch. "So that's it," I said. "You keep the buildings. Anthony sulks. In 3 months, we quietly file the divorce and go back to our separate lives." The words tasted wrong. Elena watched me, searching my face. "Is that what you want?" she asked. I looked at her, at the woman who'd taped eviction notices and fixed broken pipes, who'd sat with me on the roof and in court, who'd offered me a deal, and somewhere along the way, something far messier and more precious. "No," I said, "not anymore." She exhaled, something like relief and fear mingling in her eyes. "Josh," she said softly, "when this started, I saw you as a solution, a line item. You were numbers in a ledger I had to balance. You changed that without my permission, and I resented you for it for a while." "Sorry?" I said, half laughing. She shook her head. "Don't be. You made me remember what it's like to have someone in my corner who doesn't want something from me except me. That terrifies me more than Anthony ever did." "I don't need your buildings," I said. "I don't want your money. I mean, I'll still take the student loan help if the offer's on the table, but that's not why I'm still here. She smiled then, a real, unguarded smile that made her look years younger. The money's on the table, she said, but maybe we adjust the terms of the contract. Renewal? I asked. Indefinite, she said, with an option to renegotiate every morning over coffee. That's a lot of fine print, I said. I'm a landlord, she said. I like fine print. She held out her hand, not like a business partner, but like someone offering something fragile. So, Mr. Miller, she said, do you want to stay married? For real this time? My heart thudded. Yes, I said, without the free rent even. Don't get carried away, she said, but her eyes were shining. I stepped closer, the world narrowing to us, and the warmth of the sun on her face. In that case, I murmured, I'm going to kiss my wife now. About time, she said. Under the indifferent gaze of downtown traffic and the distant honk of horns, I kissed her. It wasn't a staged photo op or a duty. It was messy, real, and full of all the things we hadn't put in writing. Somewhere behind us, I think I heard Anthony swear. Somewhere above us, pigeons flapped and a siren wailed. But right there, in that moment, it was just us. The broke tenant and the stubborn landlord who'd tried to turn marriage into a business deal and accidentally found something neither of us had budgeted for. Love, apparently, doesn't care about contracts. And free rent? That was just a bonus.